Good evening, everybody. So we've officially gone over the topics of the stages of the path shared with beings of medium capacity, but we haven't gone over the 12 links yet. So essentially, the methods or somebody has to mute themselves. Okay. So the methods for achieving liberation or nirvana were explained to be the Four Noble Truths, right? The practice of the Four Noble Truths. And likewise, we have the practice or contemplation of the 12 links of dependent origination. So essentially, the 12 links of dependent origination encapsulate the first two truths of links of interdependence, or interdependence in general can be explained by way of the thoroughly afflicted class, which is what we're dealing with here, or by way of the purified class of phenomena. So here, because we're studying the topics shared with beings of medium capacity, we're studying the 12 links of dependent origination by looking principally at, one second, sorry, let me just ask Geshe. And here, because we're in the context of persons of medium capacity, we can apply the topic of the 12 links of dependent origination to the Four Noble Truths. Of course, it can be applied to emptiness and so on and so forth, but here it's being applied to the Four Noble Truths. So what does interdependence mean? What are we talking about here? To bring it back to the source language in Sanskrit, it is pratitya, right? So that can take on many meanings, but pratitya in the context of the Prasangika school of thought, right? Nagarjuna's school of thought applies this to all phenomena, right? All phenomena being established through meeting, right? Through interdependence. So here, the 12 links of dependent origination explain the way sentient beings cycle within samsara, right? So therefore, it is an explanation of interdependence from the perspective of the thoroughly afflicted class of phenomena, right? Principally, in this context, we talk about the Four Noble Truths and the way sentient beings enter into and exit from samsara, right? And the Buddha taught this in a very simple way for beginners, right? These 12 links can even be represented in a picture, right? Of a wheel and its spokes along the wheel. The greater treatises present 4 general outlines when explaining the 12 links of dependent origination. The first is he who cycles, or the one who cycles, right? The second is that by which they cycle. The third is where they cycle. And the fourth is the manner in which they cycle. So the first, the one who cycles, are the 6 types of beings in samsara, right? Basically, anyone who takes birth. And the second outline of that by which they cycle explains that it is not without causes and conditions, but actually it is due to karma and afflictions, right? Where they cycle is into the 3 realms, right? Due to karma and afflictions, one takes birth into the desire, the form, or the formless realms, or you can explain that in terms of the 4 states of existence, or the 4 types of birth, right? Birth from a womb, an egg, heat, or miraculous birth. So we'll explain the 12 links of dependent origination with respect to one type of being. So here in this context, we'll use a human being, right? In order for a human being to take rebirth, they require all 12 factors. Also, taking the example of a human being who takes birth in the womb, they require 6 causes for that to eventuate, right? So you can divide the 12 links into 6 causes and 6 results in the context of a womb birth. So, of course, the first cause is the first link of ignorance. And that link of ignorance motivates the second link, right? Karmic formations. So through ignorance, one accumulates a karmic formation. That karmic formation is deposited onto the third link of consciousness, right? It becomes a karmic imprint. Then that karmic imprint at the time of death is activated or enhanced by craving and grasping. And therefore, that karmic imprint becomes the 10th link of existence, it's called, which is essentially a powerful karma that is being activated. It becomes a powerful potential. And then when one dies, having activated that karma, one will take rebirth into a womb, for example, right? In the context of taking birth as a human. So then one takes birth into the womb, right? One connects to the next life. So the consciousness enters the womb. And then you establish name and form, right? The fourth link of dependent origination. So name represents 4 of the 5 aggregates, right? Which are the aggregate of feeling, compositional factors, discrimination, and consciousness, right? And then, of course, you have form because you've entered into a form. Then the fetus starts to grow and you develop the sense sources, right? The 5th link. So you start to develop the 5 sense powers or 5 sense powers, we can say. But Geshe said you have not yet initially developed the sense consciousnesses that arise in dependence upon those. Right, then gradually you develop the 6th link of contact, right? And in this context, we have to say that feeling is not yet present, right? So you just have contact, and then feeling is developed later, right? Feelings of happiness, suffering, and neutral feelings. And then in this context, we'll say that when the mother gives birth, that is the 11th link of birth. And then you start aging and eventually you die, right? The 12th link, of course. It's uncertain how old you get. Aging can be considered starting from as soon as birth happens. So this is a presentation of the 12 links in the context of a single birth, right? Wherein you can posit 6 causes and 6 effects, right? It's not necessarily always presented in the context of a single birth in other treatises. The first link is ignorance. So essentially that which is the cause of karma and afflictions. Of course, the different philosophical school systems within Buddhism will each posit something slightly different as to what this ignorance actually is. In our case, we posit that which accords with the prasangika viewpoint, right? That viewpoint which is held by Chandrakirti and so forth. So it is the grasping at true existence when observing the self, right? That apprehension that views the I and grasps at it as being truly existent. And that is an ignorance that is confused with respect to the nature of reality, right? Fundamental ignorances can be divided or posited in two ways with respect to the 12 links. An ignorance or confusion with respect to karma and effect, and a confusion with respect to the nature of reality.
Mm.
A confusion with respect to the nature of reality is said to be the type of fundamental ignorance that will cause the accumulation of meritorious karma and unwavering karma. Essentially, that type of ignorance is what accumulates karma that projects a happy rebirth. Whereas an ignorance that is confused with respect to karmic causality will cause the accumulation of karma that projects a lower rebirth. And that is how we get to the second link, which is karmic formations, right? Because this fundamental ignorance, whether you posit as ignorance confused with respect to the nature of reality or karmic causality, it motivates or formulates the accumulation of a karma, right? And in this context, that karma or the second link is a projecting karma. So some people might get confused and think, well, are all karmas projecting karmas then? But that's not the case because you can have karma in the continuum of Arya beings, right? Who have seen reality directly, and their karma is considered uncontaminated karma and not karma that projects a rebirth in cyclic existence. But just simply talking within this context of the second link of dependent origination, right? How we enter into samsara, these karmas are projecting karmas. They project a rebirth. Those who accumulate karma that projects a rebirth in samsara is said to be only ordinary beings, right? Not Arya beings. Because in order to accumulate a karma that projects a rebirth, you require ignorance to precede that. And Arya beings do not give rise to manifest ignorance that would motivate such a karma because they have seen reality directly. Right? And I believe Geshe quoted a sutra, a certain sutra on dependent origination, which says, if one sees the truth, there is no projection, right? And being free from craving, there is no taking of birth. So that encapsulates the story for Arya beings. It's a little bit tricky with respect to ordinary beings because ordinary beings can include beings up to the level of the path of preparation, right? And the highest level of the path of preparation, which is supreme dharma. There's debate with respect to beings on that level and whether they can accumulate karma that would project them into a rebirth. Less again.
Mm.
We accumulate many different types of karma. Should we say that all of the karma that we accumulate in our day-to-day lives is a projecting karma for a future rebirth in samsara? I don't think so, because, for example, actions that are motivated strongly by bodhicitta or a strong meditation on bodhicitta itself shouldn't project a rebirth in samsara because they're not motivated by the first link of ignorance, right? So we said that the second link of formational karmic formations are divided into three types of actions: meritorious, non-meritorious, and unwavering. So meritorious actions are those that project a rebirth as a human or a god in the desire realm. Non-meritorious actions are those actions of the 12 non-virtues that will project a rebirth in the lower realms. And this so-called unwavering actions project a rebirth in the two higher realms, right? The form and formless realms. So those sort of actions would be certain meditations, right? Like karma binding or the so-called preparations for an actual concentration in the form realm, right? So such strong meditations, which are karma bindings, will project a rebirth in the two higher realms within samsara. Next is the third link of consciousness. Well, the first link motivates one of those projecting karmas, the second link of karmic formations. Then that karma needs a place to stay, right? Where does that karma go? Well, it goes onto or with the third link of consciousness. So that karma can, it's explained as either becoming the nature of a consciousness itself, right? It turns into the entity of a consciousness, or it turns into an imprint, which is deposited onto the stream of consciousness. So this third link of consciousness is posited as two types: the consciousness of the causal period and consciousness of the resultant period. So when explaining the causal links within the 12 links of dependent origination, right? First, ignorance motivates an action, then that action is deposited onto consciousness. We're talking about consciousness of the causal period. Then when you explain the wheel turning and the results emerging, and one takes rebirth into a womb, at that time you posit consciousness of the resultant period. So if I were to explain the 12 links, I could go into extreme detail and we'd run out of time. But to sort of summarize it, I mean, there is this classic drawing, how it's represented as the wheel of existence. And in the middle of that, there are animals, right, that are symbolic of the links. So in the middle, you have a pig, a bird, and a snake. So the pig represents ignorance, the bird, desire, and the snake, anger. So Geshe is actually looking at a picture as he explains this. So I'm going to bring up a picture on Google because I have no idea what exactly he's looking at. All right. Okay, so in the very center, even if you just Google it, you'll find this. You have the three animals, right? And then surrounding that is the second layer to this picture. On the right side, you have like this black circle, right? It's half black, and then on the left, it's white. So the black side represents um, negative karmic causality, and the left side, the white side, is positive karmic causality. Right, good and bad karma, essentially. Loss again. Then outside that circle, you have the next element of the picture, which is in six parts, and that represents true sufferings, right? The second level before that represents true origins, right? The white karma and the black karma that cause the next circle, right? It's divided into six parts, which are six types of existences, right? They represent all types of suffering, right? The suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and also all pervasive suffering.
다 콜로 시바들라. 땡땡이라. 콜로 시바리데.
So I see you've shared on the screen the inside part of the wheel. If we could get the complete wheel, that would be better. I'm also looking for a picture of it. But essentially, there's a fourth element to this wheel. It's like the outside wheel. And it depicts each of the 12 links symbolically. So it starts with the link of ignorance, which is represented by a blind man, right? Someone could link me to a decent picture. Just get tiny, tiny pictures.
Okay, the picture is coming.
Great. 건서 빠르직 세기도 한다겠나.
아니
기술된슬라
오늘
대야직.
칠라다 오늘아. 살도 통로실라다.
Yes.
Everyone relax, drink some tea. We'll find a picture. Oh, there we go. That's better. Nice. Less. Okay, if you could not zoom in too much. Yeah, okay. So we're at the top right. Right, look under the mouth of Yama, his teeth. On the right, you start with the blind man. Then that represents ignorance. Then the second picture is of a potter, right? A man making pots. He's making all sorts of pots, right? Some of all sorts of quality, right? So it has to be connected somehow to the first link. And the first link of ignorance is a strong motivation. And this strong motivation causes all sorts of formations, right? All sorts of different, here, symbolically, different types of pots, right? With different aspects. The third picture on this outer wheel is that of a monkey, right? And this represents consciousness because a monkey jumping up and down and all around a tree represents how our consciousness jumps around from lifetime to lifetime. So then the fourth picture is that of people traveling in a boat. Yeah, you can zoom out just a little bit. Yeah. Someone is very excitedly zooming in and out of this picture. Okay, so this is the fourth link of name and form. So how is that representing name and form? Well, consciousness before it gets to the next rebirth is traveling through the bardo, right? So you can think of this boat as like the bardo being support. And the consciousness is riding that towards the next rebirth. So that boat goes to the far shore, which is the next birth. So then the fifth picture is that of a house. So this house is representing an empty house, and it represents an empty house because having taken birth into the mother's womb, one starts to develop the five sense sources, right? The five sense spheres, which are the basis for the sense consciousnesses. But this empty house represents the point at which there is no sense consciousness yet. So it's representing an abode for the consciousness. After this empty house, you see two people in an embrace. So this represents contact. And within the links, contact comes before feeling. So this should represent a time where feeling has not yet arisen, right? So this is just the point of contact, which will then give rise to a strong feeling, right? Of happy, suffering, or neutral feeling. So of course, at the time of contact, the object, the sense sources, and the consciousness that has arisen from those have come together. But this representation has to be of that point in time where one does not yet experience a strong feeling that arises from those coming together. So the seventh picture is, sorry, it's behind my camera, that's why I'm being weird, moving around, is a picture of a person with an arrow going into their eye. So this represents feeling. Let me clarify with Geshe, I was a bit uncertain. So this link is still representative of that time in the womb where the fetus is still developing, right? And these links are all coming together. So this represents a point in the womb where the fetus starts to experience strong feelings of happiness, suffering, and neutral feelings. The next picture is a young man sitting on a bench drinking alcohol. So this represents the link of craving, right? Which is essentially attachment or desire. And it's represented by a young man drinking alcohol because it's supposed to represent what sort of ruins society in a way, right? One drinks, one gets drunk, and then one does all sorts of stupid things. Likewise, under the influence of attachment, one is in a sense intoxicated and goes on to commit disruptive actions. The next picture is of a monkey eating fruit off a tree. So the eighth link of craving becomes the link of grasping when it becomes strong, right? So essentially, grasping is an intensified craving. So this monkey, like frantically picking fruit off a tree and just chowing down on it, represents this intensity of desire that is going to propel rebirth again and again. Checking if we are looking at the same picture, because Geshe-la's got his own reference. So it appears to be the same thing. It's a picture of a person. What he's doing is not clear. But this person represents the 10th link of existence. So the 10th link of existence is essentially the same as, not the same, but it is essentially the second link, but this of compositional action. But it's at the point when it has become a strong potential that has been nurtured and activated by the 8th and 9th links of craving and grasping, to the extent that it will project a further rebirth, right? So remember that the 10th link is essentially the second link, but in an activated, strong state. So the next picture is depicting a mother giving birth to a child. Birth technically happens when the consciousness enters the womb, but that's probably really difficult to depict, right? If you think about it. So instead of drawing something that is symbolic of that, they've opted for something that's much more relatable, which is birth from the womb, right? But still, the 11th link should be understood to be birth when consciousness enters the womb. The final link of aging and death is represented by a man carrying a corpse on his back, right? He's carrying a body to illustrate that at the end of birth, there is necessarily death. And of course, this link of aging and death doesn't necessitate or imply that one dies after having become old. This is not in accordance with reality, because some people die as soon as they're born, some people die when they're children, adults, or when they do reach old age. Some even die in the womb. So therefore, It's death that is applicable at any stage after the consciousness has entered the womb. Thus. So the Buddha taught this wheel of existence within scripture, right? This wheel of existence that represents the 12 links from the perspective of the afflicted class of phenomena. But in the original scriptures, it wasn't made clear what the images represent necessarily. That was only clarified later by the Indian scholars, right? That there's like necessarily a blind man and a potter and this monkey in the tree and what they represent. This breakdown of the symbolism didn't come later until the commentaries. So understand that all of these images within this wheel of existence represent true sufferings and true origins. That much is clear. There's also another image in which a bhikshu is pointing to the moon. And that represents that if one abandons true sufferings and true origins, one achieves the third noble truth of true cessations. And this entire wheel is gripped by this demon, right? A Rakshasa, perhaps. So this entire wheel being gripped by the claws and the fangs of this demon means that within all of existence, there's death and impermanence, right? It simply represents death and impermanence. Everyone that has come before us was impermanent and they died, including the Buddha. And everyone that is present now and all those who will come later are also impermanent and will die. Then there's some other imagery around the wheel of existence, some excess, let's say, like perhaps skulls and so forth. And Geshe said anything that is external to the principal elements is just additional ornamentation by the artist. When the Buddha taught the 12 links of dependent origination, here in this depiction, it was taught through a process of arising, right? You can explain the 12 links of dependent origination not only from the thoroughly afflicted class and the process of arising, but you can explain it from a process of those links ceasing. Likewise, you can have 12 links presented from the perspective of the thoroughly purified class and their process of arising, and likewise the process of reversal or cessation of the thoroughly purified class. So here you can see it's a process of arising of the from the perspective of the thoroughly afflicted class. If we explain the reverse process, right, from the perspective of the thoroughly purified class, first, ignorance is stopped by way of realizing emptiness directly. And then if that first link of ignorance is stopped, then the next link of karmic formations is also stopped. If karmic formations stop, then the third link of consciousness, where such formations would be deposited, is also stopped. And then through stopping that, the eighth and ninth links of craving and grasping is stopped, and then the other links no longer arise. So therefore, they are all stopped in turn. Not the first six, but there are 6 causes within these 12 links. You have the first link, the second, the third, the 8th, 9th, and 10th, right? To stop these requires a true path, right? The truth path being a direct realization of selflessness. So through stopping these 6 causes, through a true path, one then stops the 6 results of those within these 12 links, which are the 4th link of name and form, the 5th link of sense sources, the 6th link of contact, 7th of feeling, and the 11th of birth, and 12th of aging and death, right? So the direct realization of selflessness acts as an antidote and fundamentally contradicts the first link of ignorance, and therefore all those 6 causes are stopped, by which the 6 results are also stopped. Thus, are all of the 12 links afflictions? No, some are and some aren't. So the 1st, the 8th, and the 9th are afflictions. So that is ignorance, craving, and grasping. The 2nd and the 10th links, so karmic formations and what we call existence, are karma. And then the rest, all the other links, are true sufferings. As said before, these 12 links are explained from the perspective of a human being who takes birth from the womb, right? This explanation in terms of 6 causes and 6 effects doesn't apply in this sequence to beings who take miraculous birth or are born from heat, right? So, for example, a god who is born in the form realm or formless realm, for example, such a birth is not explained in this sequence. So does this cause and effect process, right, of 6 causes and 6 results necessarily finish, or is it undergone within one lifetime? Not necessarily, right? If you think about it, let's take our lifetime as a basis from the perspective of someone who's going to also take rebirth as a human being in the next life, right? In this very lifetime, we'll be motivated by ignorance and thus accumulate karmic formations, which are deposited onto the consciousness of the causal period, right, in this lifetime. And then when we're about to die, you can imagine that through the 8th and 9th links of craving and grasping, we activate that karmic imprint and it becomes existence. And then we die, right? So far, 6, right? The 6 causes have finished in this lifetime. We die, and then we take rebirth. And then in the womb, we develop name, form, the sense sources, contact, and feeling. And then we're born and we grow up and die. And those are the 6 results. So it took 2 lifetimes to complete this wheel of 12 links, right? In the first lifetime, the 6 causes. In the second lifetime, the 6 results. And with respect to propelling karma, it can be divided into karma that is experienced in the next birth, in future rebirths, and in this very lifetime. So it's very difficult to posit the 12 links in terms of karma that is experienced in this very lifetime, right? As we just saw in the previous example, you can posit it as that which is experienced in the next, right, the very next rebirth. But you can also posit the 12 links in terms of karmic results that are experienced in subsequent lifetimes, right, future lifetimes. So you can think of a person who is motivated by ignorance, accumulates compositional, right, action, which is deposited on the consciousness. And then when they die, their craving and grasping don't activate the karma, the second link that was accumulated in this lifetime, but it activates a link that was accumulated in previous lifetimes, right? To be projected to whatever rebirth you can think of, right? And that is activated, and then one takes rebirth into that life. And in this way, you experience results which are thus experienced in future lifetimes. respective to when you accumulated that karma many lifetimes ago, if that made sense. This was a brief explanation of the 12 links of dependent origination. And of course, you can bring this explanation into your practice and meditations. So you would do so by contemplating each link and thinking about the cause and effect process within these 12 links and how it cycles through again and again. That is a contemplation from the perspective of the afflicted class and the origins of samsaric rebirth. And then you can contemplate it from the perspective of the purified class and how one reverses from this process by stopping fundamental ignorance, and then thinking how if one stops the first link of ignorance, how the second link will stop, and thus the third link, and contemplating how that makes sense. So that's the way you meditate on it. And there are said to be great benefits from doing so, right? There are great benefits from contemplating and meditating on the 12 links, right? It's said to speed up one's achievement of Buddhahood, right? Of omniscience. And thus, also by contemplating the drawbacks of samsaric existence, one gives rise to renunciation, thoughts of compassion for others, bodhicitta, and so on.